All right, guys, so we just talked about the big pro-Palestine protests, anti-genocide protests that really, they got ambitious and they were shutting down major bridges and roads to major airports and things of that nature. And, you guys tell me, I'm very curious what all you guys think about that, because it's certainly not the most likely to have positive outcomes. It's not at the top of the hierarchy in the way to protest that's most effective, in my opinion. But then again, as I always tell you guys, it's almost like there's a genocide exception clause where it's like anything short of violence, we got to stop arming and funding a genocide, right? Like it's the most clearly, moral imperative we've ever had about anything ever, right? So I'm curious what you guys think about that. But I know somebody who has very, very clear thoughts in the wrong direction, let's say. Guy by the name of Tom Cotton. Now, Tom Cotton is a loathsome cretin, to say the least. First of all, he looks like a fucking giraffe. He's got the longest neck and the nerdiest face you've ever seen. And he's a massive scumbag. So I remember the thing that sticks with me the most about Tom Cotton is that he was one of those guys who was, far after the debate was settled about torture in this country, which it's kind of crazy we were even having a debate about torture during the War on Terror era, but we were. He was one of these guys who's like, let's keep torturing. I'm pro-torture. We need to do more torture. So that's what you need to know about this guy. He's also one of the worst neocons, right up there with Lindsey Graham and John Bolton and all those cretins who never met a war they didn't like. He doesn't, I'm Mr. Tough Guy, bro. Let's go bomb everybody, bro. So he comes out and is talking about these protesters shutting down like the Golden Gate Bridge, for example. And he says the following: I encourage people who get stuck behind the pro-Hamas mobs blocking traffic. Pro-Hamas mobs. See, this is why I can't take these people seriously. Because he's not even making the most basic, minimal effort to even be honest about the situation. Like, you can disagree with them while acknowledging their main point is to stop Israel from carpet bombing babies and starving Gaza to death. No, he calls them pro-Hamas. I encourage people who get stuck behind the pro-Hamas mobs blocking traffic, take matters into your own hands. It's time to put an end to this nonsense. So people looked at this, and their first thought was, okay, well, he's calling for violence. Take matters into your own hands. What does that mean? What does that mean? You want to punch them? You want to assault them? You want to stab them? You want to shoot them? You want to throw them off the bridge? What do you mean? So then he comes out, maybe he sees the backlash, I don't know. He doesn't strike me as one to read responses. He says, so this is his correction. He edited it. I encourage people who get stuck behind the pro-Hamas mobs blocking traffic, take matters into your own hands to get them out of the way. It's time to put an end to this nonsense. So he added to get them out of the way. Tom, that still begs the question, what do you mean to get them out of the way? How do you want to get them out of the way? What does that mean? So, of course, even with the correction, it's sort of like, it's still vaguely threatening, right? So now, in case you were still confused, which everybody should be, about what exactly he means, he goes on Fox News and he says the following.
I agree with you that you have to get to these criminals early. If something like this happened in Arkansas on a bridge there, let's just say I think there'd be a lot of very wet criminals that have been tossed overboard, not by law enforcement, but by the people whose road they're blocking. If they glued their hands to a car or the pavement, well, probably pretty painful to have their skin ripped off. But I think that's the way we'd handle it in Arkansas. And I would encourage most people anywhere that get stuck behind criminals like this who are trying to block traffic to take matters in their own hands. There's only usually a few of them, and there's a lot of people being inconvenienced. It's time to put an end to this nonsense.
Let's just point out the sad irony. When he says it's time to put an end to this nonsense, he does not mean stop sending money and weapons to the people carpet bombing babies. He does not mean stop giving a green light to the people bombing hospitals and schools and mosques and churches and marketplaces. He doesn't mean that. We need to put a stop to this nonsense is the people who are protesting to try to get us to stop aiding and abetting a genocide. That's what he means. But look, he laid it out. If this were to happen in Arkansas, what would we do? There'd be a lot of wet people. They'd be thrown off the bridge. Okay, Tom, you do realize that if somebody's thrown off the Golden Gate Bridge, that's a death sentence. In fact, unfortunately, a lot of people who commit suicide will go to, like the top of the George Washington Bridge or whatever bridge and jump off of it. Because, the human body can't, that sort of impact against water from that height is like landing on cement, right? So, okay, if I'm being kind, maybe he didn't know that would lead to death, right? They'd be wet. And then when he says, ripping their skin off, he couches that in, well, if they glue their hands to the pavement or glue their hands to the car, just rip their skin off. Because I guess drive away really fast or what? Run over them if their hands are on the pavement. What are we doing here? Guys, remember when, what was it? It was during, I think, the George Floyd protests and riots. And Tom Cotton wrote an article for the New York Times where he said, just declare martial law, send in the military, crack skulls. I need you to think about what that means. I need you to think about that. Were there some people who were protesting who actually crossed the line and became rioters? Of course, there were people who rioted. And those people broke laws, and they will be held accountable, and they have been held accountable, and that's just the way it works. You're allowed to peacefully protest. You are not allowed to start burning down a Walgreens or a small business, right? That's obvious. Nobody's against that, right? Nobody's against holding those people accountable and responsible for their actions. But when he says, send in the military, when he says, do martial law, what that means is we're going to treat them all the same. The 90% peaceful protesters, they're going to be held accountable in the same way the rioters are, because we're just going to shut the whole thing down. And by the way, that's what our generals were saying when Trump was trying to invoke the Insurrection Act, which is what Tom Cotton supported, and just send the U.S. military into our own streets. Our own generals were like, this is not what our military is for. Our military is not to police the streets of the United States of America to crack down on people who are exercising their First Amendment rights in the majority of cases of people who are out there on the street. But that's his belief. His belief is, I don't care. They're all guilty. Shut it all down. Send in the military. Lock them all up. Kick them all out. No more First Amendment. No more free speech rights. No more right to protest. No, I think this is nonsense because I don't agree with what they're calling for. So authoritarianism. Let's do that. All in authoritarianism. And now you get it here too. Again, you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of the whole debate around the Houthis. Because the Houthis started seizing ships and, stopping trade with Israel. And in some instances, they would get the wrong ship, and that was a problem. But as a general rule, they were saying, we are trying to stop trade in and out of Israel because we want to stop them from doing the genocide. And they were very clear. Hey, if they stop, we stop. If they stop, we stop. They stop bombing women and children. If they stop destroying Gaza, we will stop seizing the ships. And everybody decided to act professionally stupid. Everybody with any position of power. Gosh, what should we do? Let's go bomb the Houthis. Let's go start another war. Let's use our firepower against their firepower. It's hard to figure out what do they want? How do we get them to stop doing this? Nobody in the room brought up the obvious. Okay, have Israel stop carpet bombing Gaza, and they will stop. When there was a brief ceasefire, they stopped. And this is the same thing. It's like, you're so mad at these protesters doing this thing that they're doing. It's so bad. It's so evil. How do we get them to stop? Throw them off the bridge, rip off their skin, physically assault them, move them out of the way. Or you could have the U.S. stop arming and funding Israel. Because again, that's the whole point here. But what he wants is to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to arm and fund the genocide. He wants to support the genocide. He's in favor of that. And he also wants to crack skulls and go after protesters. He has a track record of wanting to do that. So this is who this guy is, man. Now, look, I understand. It's actually, in my opinion, it's actually a very complicated discussion about the strategy and the tactics being used here. I did a whole separate segment on that. You guys can watch it. So I don't think there's an easy answer about whether or not this is the right way to go. To me, you guys know I want to target the politicians. I want to target the military-industrial complex. I want to target the generals. I want to target the president. I want to block the ships or the planes that are about to go with the weapons to Israel. That's where I think all of our focus should be. I love the harassing of Congress members in Congress to try to, they can't go anywhere peacefully because they're getting shamed and it's impacting them, and they feel, is it really worth it to take the AIPAC money and do their bidding, or should I listen to the constituents who are clearly pissed off about this? That's the best way to do it. This is not my favorite way of protesting, but having said that, there's no doubt why these people are doing this and what the point is and what their intentions are and where their heart is on this. And instead of acknowledging that, digesting it, reacting in a rational, logical way, adjusting course, it's let's keep arming and funding the genocide, and also let's crack some skulls with some protesters. Okay, look, final point is this. He is more outraged at protesters blocking traffic than he is at 15,000 children who were murdered by Israel on purpose. That about says it all. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.